ready for the 2026 general election.
It's in the ballot production present.
Bringing Kiwi's election 2026.
Covering electorates from Cape Reinga in the north to Stewart Island in the south, everywhere in between.
Elmo, not just in your community hall, but also to watch from the comfort of your own home.
Watch live, watch live.
Let's It's in the Ballot bring you election 2026.
Covering electorates from Cape Reinga in the north to Stewart Island in the south and everywhere in between.
And in the liberal
And welcome. And how's spicy jalapeno margarita going?
Yeah, I had a pretty spicy week last week. As you can imagine, the cat saga, as I was talking about trying to find my missing cat. Well, it turned out that the missing cat had bacterial pneumonia, so he spent about a week in the vet clinic.
Oh, God, that doesn't sound fun. Home now?
He's home now, yeah.
Very quiet and probably sleeping a ridiculous amount of time now?
No, he wants to eat everything in the house.
Oh, God, oh, heck. Oh, okay, yes.
Oh, here he is. Hello, here he is. Here he is. Yes, he's feeling much better now, aren't you? Hello. Yes, you almost died.
Yeah, some vets being made rich.
Oh yeah, it only costed me about $1,000.
Yeah,
which
just
is pretty...
you can't ask Tefana Aura to pay for it.
No, but, you know, I mean, put it this way. He had a medical team of 5 people. He had 2 veterinarians and 3 vet nurses. He was pretty much living there for about a week. He had a buffet put in front of him every day of the week. He had antibiotics shoved into him. Yeah, no, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
About it. That's not bad, considering if you're saying the United States, add a 0 on the end of that, and then add another 0 on for the if there's operations or anything that goes with it.
Yeah, and you know the result is he's a very happy cat, yeah. Now he's a very clingy cat because he was gone for about a week.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's. I don't know if you grew up with cats, but yeah, cats can be quite.
No, my mum couldn't stand them.
Oh,
she's a dog person. My dad did have a cat, but they weren't. I was going to say he's had different cats at Hokio Beach at the time, but they were, apart from Roxy, they were just basically did not interact with you at all. They were good pest control.
But this guy is quite different. Like he was making friends with everyone at the vet clinic.
Oh, yeah. Like, Dad's... I'm not sure if Roxy is still alive now, but when Dad got Roxy, it was a sudden jump. Because Roxy went from, like, oh, you're a new person, you got to play with me, sort of thing. It was quite weird, and so that was different. I know when I was in Coromandel Street, Charles had a cat called Cat. Don't know why the hell he called it Cat. I mean, he could have called it the Chinese name of Cat, because his first language is Mandarin, not English. But besides the point, but that's what he named it. She was fun and playful and all that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I've never really got to the stage of actually owning an animal. Like, I considered it after Charles left. I considered finding a cat to replace his one, but ultimately, in the end, there were when we got a little heads up from the landlord that he might have to end our lease to do repairs, was just a telltale sign, don't get an animal. And it probably did pay off in that situation. But that might all change now where I currently am. I might see if I can potentially have that.
Yeah, I mean, I have the opposite effect on animals. Just come to me. I don't go to them. They always end up at my door. Like, that's how I got my pet rooster. He slept on my front door. So I was like, okay, you need a home. That's how I ended up with a ram. That's how I ended up with this cat. That's how, like, all of the farmyard just came to me.
Well, where you are, it's completely irrelevant. I'd be a bit confused if a ram ends up at our doorstep.
Yeah.
I mean, put it this way: we don't have a Cornwall Park like Auckland does, where they actually have farm animals inside the inside, like you've got this you've got all these built-up houses, and suddenly you've got like this random farm, this area over it.
Now, where I live, the farm animals come to you.
Yeah, or they come running halfway down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, for those who are wondering, our current bills we're covering this week is the Natural Environments Bill and the Planning Bill, which are to replace the Resource Management Act.
Yep.
And submissions are open if you'd like to place a submission on them. And the submissions for them close. When do they close? It should be in my list in here. They close on Friday, the 13th of February, so you still got some time to put in a submission. And
yeah, this is your RMA replacement.
Yeah, and actually, you should put in a submission as well.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the notes that I've taken tonight will give people an idea of what they could submit on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's kick off and let's hear our first speech from the bush.
Members, the ayes are 102, the noes are 21. The question is agreed to.
Hold on a moment. Sorry, got to reload the page. The thing I was using to monitor our speed, to play with our speed.
Members, the ayes are 102, the noes are 21.
Has ended up with malware in it. So Google Chrome has barred us from using it.
Oh, wow, okay.
Members, the ayes are 102, the noes are 21. The question is agreed to.
Planning Bill, first reading.
The question is that the Planning Bill be considered by the Environment Committee. Those of that opinion, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
I move that the Planning Bill be reported to the House by 26 June 2026.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The call on government order of the day number 2.
Natural Environment Bill, first reading.
Honourable Chris Bishop.
I present a legislative statement on the Natural Environment Bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website. Chris Bishop.
I move that the Natural Environment Bill be now read a first time, and I nominate the Environment Committee to consider this bill. At the appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by 26 June 2026. Madam Speaker, this bill ushers in a new era for environmental management in New Zealand. As I said in my remarks on the previous bill, the RMA has tried to do everything under one law: planning, environment, resource management, city and district plans. It hasn't delivered the prosperity that we were promised back in the early 1990s, and it has failed the environment. To take one simple metric, almost half of New Zealand's total river length was not suitable for swimming between 2016 and 2020 due to unsafe infection risk. Take another example, in 2021, 68% of Indigenous freshwater-dependent bird species were threatened with extinction or at the risk of becoming threatened. Many of these species are found nowhere else in the world. That was in 2021. Historic land use decisions have left communities unnecessarily exposed to natural hazards, making the financial impact of disasters even worse. Cyclone Gabrielle caused $9 to $14.5 billion in damage to physical assets. So we are introducing, Madam Speaker, two clear focused pieces of legislation: the planning bill that that the House has just voted on, and the natural environment bill. The two bills work hand in hand, and the purpose of the bill that we're talking about is to establish a framework for the use, protection and enhancement of the natural environment. These bills are the country's opportunity to break free from a system that has shackled us with complexity, duplication, red tape and uncertainty and confused accountability and decision making. So we are intending to fundamentally change how environmental decisions are made. The Natural Environment Bill follows a deliberate hierarchy, and I don't want to recanvass what was talked about during the last debate, but the funnel that I talked about in the Planning Bill channels decision making from national goals down to local actions. We intend the same to work when it comes to the environment. The new system starts with clear goals that focus the system at the top and are then refined through the layers. And if I could just make one comment in relation to the last debate, it was a little bit, I've got to say, disappointing to hear the Greens say that they liked much of what was in the bill, but they had an issue with the wording of the goals and the hierarchy of the goals. Well, fair enough. Nothing's perfect. We're up for the debate around the wording of the goals and exactly how they manifest in practice. That seems to me to be precisely the sort of issue that you should get into in detail at Select Committee. So despite Julianne Genter saying she thought much of what was in the planning bill was really good, and I suspect she'd say the same about the Natural Environment Bill, they voted against it anyway, which I think says it all really, that the Greens are ultimately the party of protest, not a responsible party of government. Really pleasing to see the Labor Party recognising, despite a bit of heat and light in the last debate, and I suspect this one too, that this is a big step forward. It picks up on some of what's been developed in the past, changes it a little bit, or changes it quite a lot actually, and is a big step forward for the country. So I won't go through the goals of the Natural Environment Bill, members can read them for themselves, but it is about natural resources within environmental limits, and that is really important. In terms of environmental limits, Madam Speaker, New Zealanders rightfully share pride in our pristine environment, and we have a joint belief collectively as a country in protecting our environment for our children and our children's children. But the RMA has not allowed the development of our resources within environmental limits. That will change under this bill. Central and local government decision makers will be required to set binding environmental limits informed by data and community aspirations. Excuse me. National limits will protect human health, guided by Ministry of Health standards, and regional entities, which are currently regional councils but may change, will set ecosystem limits for fresh water, coastal water, land, soils and Indigenous biodiversity using methods set out in national standards. The Minister can specify minimum levels for ecosystem health limits. There may be circumstances where a council and community consider it appropriate to set less stringent limits than those set by the Minister. This will be possible in the new system. The limits will be legally binding and linked to specific areas through natural environmental plans, with resource use capped or managed through action plans. Exceptions will exist for critical infrastructure, and even then plans must show how limits will be restored over time if they are exceeded. Clear science-based limits give certainty about what activities are likely to be approved to ensure conversations happen early and incentivise efficient resource use. I do think this will lead to innovation, the reduction in environmental harm, and it will help manage cumulative environmental effects. There will be protection for Indigenous biodiversity. Regional policy statements and plans under the current system often duplicate national direction and add unnecessary complexity. We are scrapping that duplication and replacing it with a single natural environmental plan in every combined regional plan. This plan will set will implement nationally set environmental limits for human health, and regional entities will be required to set limits for ecosystem health using the methodology, as I say, set out in national standards. The intention of the bill is to permit or allow more use of the natural environment within limits. The new system is about bringing common sense back into planning decision making. A key part of this is proportionate regulation. The National Environment Bill requires decision makers to take a proportionate regulatory approach. There are procedural principles to embed good practice and set clear expectations in the new system. Voluntary and farmer-led tools will be used wherever possible, with stronger rules used only when needed. The tools include voluntary action and catchment groups when resources are not under pressure, freshwater farm plans, flexible and farmer-led, helping farmers identify environmental risks on their farm and then plan practical actions to manage these. One of the things I find most frustrating about the debate between town and country, rural and urban, is that it's our farmers, Madam Speaker, who are often the environment's best friends. It's in their interest to look after the environment. And some of the disdain directed at rural and urban New Zealand, and some of the rhetoric about environmental vandalism and environmental damage, is frankly facile, misleading, wrong and deeply counterproductive. It's absolutely true that it is in farmers and growers' best interests to make sure we have a natural environment that we can all be proud of. This bill establishes a framework to allow voluntary action, catchment groups who do a great job already within the confines of the current system, and more proportionate and flexible approaches at a local level. It allows for action plans led by councils for getting back within environmental limits when they've been breached. It allows for land use controls which place restrictions on some activities, for example vegetation clearance, diffuse discharges or earthworks. One issue that I know the Select Committee is going to want to get into, Madam Speaker, is allocation. Under the RMA, the taking or use of natural resources such as water, coastal space or discharge capacity is allocated through a combination of permitted activities and consents. Basically, we use a first-in, first-served model. They're allocated in the order they're received, and existing consent holders seeking replacement consents have priority over new applicants. I think it would be fair to say that this is a method of allocation, but it is a method that I think is increasingly recognised as inefficient and inequitable when resources are scarce. Which is not always the case, but when they are scarce, it is not always the best allocation mechanism. So the Natural Environment Bill initially retains the RMA's allocation approach, but it also allows for new allocation approaches, such as market-based approaches and comparative consenting, to be enabled through national instruments. This would be a big change for New Zealand, and I want to flag that right up front. And it is not government policy right now to do that. But I think it is worth having the debate about those instruments and about those allocation mechanisms, and I'm sure that the Select Committee will get into it. That would be a big change for New Zealand, and there would be consequences of that. But it is, I think, tolerably clear that the status quo could be better. Making that change is not government policy, but it does allow the option and the flexibility in this bill for that system to be turned on. In my, sorry? Well, it's not the status quo, but if the bill passes, it will become the status quo, and it will allow a discussion and a debate about those issues. In closing, Madam Speaker, I wish to acknowledge the hard work of my Under-Secretary, Simon Court, in relation to these bills. And I also just want to take a couple of seconds in the closing of the second of these two very important bills for New Zealand's future to acknowledge the hard work of the Ministry for the Environment team and indeed the cross-agency team who worked on these bills at great pressure over the last 2 years. They have been first-class performers for New Zealand, and they are first-class public servants and first-class New Zealanders. So thank you to the Ministry for the Environment team and indeed the whole of the public service for helping us get to this point. Thank you.
The question is that the motion be...
So, what's the verdict?
Okay, you want me to go first? Okay. Okay, so basically what he's done here is he's split the new RMA replacement into two separate bills. So we're just going over the first segment, which is the Natural Environment Bill. Now, about farmers. Yeah, most farmers, the majority of farmers comply with environmental laws and regulations, but some farmers are dicks and they dump things in rivers. It's why we need regulations. I don't know if anyone has seen the dead eels up in Moorhaka, but that's up near where my hapu is, up in that valley, that area there. So, you know, there is a reason why we need things like environmental protections. Now, to be fair to Chris Bishop, he's not arguing against environmental protections. I just found him going, stop beating up on farmers. You know, we should not be rewarding farmers who do horrible things, like dump things into waterways they shouldn't be dumping.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't give them a free ride. They should be held very accountable for damaging the environment, not just for the native wildlife, but also for other farmers and for other people that utilize the water. Now I'll just break down some of the claims that he went over. So the claim has been put out there that there is going to be a promised $14.8 billion in savings for administrative and compliance costs. However, this is only for administrative and compliance costs and excludes impacts on actual environmental or social outcomes, which are likely more significant. So having gone over that regulatory impact statement, we don't know the full impact of what these bills are going to result in. So, which is probably the main reason why Julianne Genter was stood up in opposition to this, because we don't actually know. Because this was a rush piece of legislation, we don't know the impacts on actual environmental or social outcomes. That's very important for Green Party folks, because we're not only we big into the environment, we're also big into things like participatory democracy, which is where locals get to have inputs into what's being built in their backyard. So we're kind of more, and we with other things like fast tracking and stuff like that, and then we've got rushed processes and bills, and it sounds great on paper. Like, look how much money the council's going to save, but those costs are going to be taken up by central government, and you've got to ask, well, central government, how are you going to make up for those costs? What services are you going to cut? Are you
actually going to fund it, or is it an unfunded mandate, which means the council still is picking up the tab?
Yeah. Or are you going to cut healthcare, or are you going to borrow, or what are you going to do in order to make up? What are you going to sell assets to make up for that? What are you going to do? And we just don't have any of those answers in the regulatory impact statement. We don't have an idea of how the extra money that would normally be picked up by the councils, how that's going to be paid for by central governments. And we have seen in the past that Luxon's kind of like, oh, we're not selling assets, not until next term. So if we get back in, so it does, when I see proposals like this, I go, how is this going to be funded for? What's going to be cut in order to make it work?
Yeah.
I just want to point this other thing out. The preferred two law structure, so the way how he split it up into two separate bills, that was actually opposed by the ministry, because and the warning that they gave was that it creates duplication, gaps, and confusion, which can make it actually more costly for government and the users that have to utilize this piece of legislation.
Okay, sorry, what did you just say? Sorry, I've just read something Blake has said and it's just like threw me completely off.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I know, I can get a bit drony and boring sometimes. But look, Chris Bishop's, or the blueprint, because it's more than just Chris Bishop that developed this, the two law structure was actually opposed by the ministry because it risks duplication and can actually cause more confusion for users and can actually result in more costs for central government.
Yeah.
So did you hear in that speech what the reason was he gave for splitting it into two separate?
To simplify the process, to speed things up, not have everything all under one act.
Yeah, that's weird because the ministry actually wanted this all under one act.
Yeah, because the Resource Management Act actually, what's it called? Because it was broad, it would cover things that might have been missed out under a narrow piece of legislation. And I mean, a good example of that was the original designing process through the Environment Court for the new Dunedin Hospital, with it being 60 metres tall. As you might remember, Troy Mihaka sitting there and saying the reason why it had to be 60 metres tall is because there were a lot of old buildings, such as churches with steeples, that sat at 55 metres. So it would be risk of helicopters knocking these buildings and having accidents. So at 60 metres high, it would be the tallest building in the city, which would then mean, in that particular scenario, would mean that it would not be risk of any obstructions from other buildings in the area, because they're all shorter.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and that's what a resource consent process is for, is to find out these anomalies that are in place, what sort of things are in place.
Yeah, especially for projects that go against like district planning.
Yeah.
So it's very important to get that data. But I just went back over my notes again. So the reason that the ministry gave for the 2 laws thing was administering 2 laws is more costly, more confusing, and will make it harder to manage issues that cross over both areas, like natural hazards. So, Cyclone Gabriel, right? If you've got 2 pieces of legislation you've got to comply with, you could get the thumbs up for, yep, this is consistent with what councils want, but it could also get the thumbs down because it's not fitting within environmental standards. The ministry went on to say that there is no supporting evidence that having 2 laws would be more successful than one improved law. I
can mention on a resource consent application for the Johnsonville market, the noise department were given the green light ahead, but the traffic department needed to impose conditions on the consent.
Yep.
And that was something, and this is that is what these sorts of things get dealt with at a resource consent hearing.
Yeah.
Is the fact that the traffic department and the sound department had different things, and I mean, in the case of the sound department was. It was a sound noise rating of the maximum noise we got was 54 decibels, which is which you're allowed to exceed the 50 decibel limit this is for Johnsonville, of a maximum of 15 minutes, which is usually allowed for, say, if a noisy truck drives past sort of scenario. It's not blasting your music at 80 decibels to sit there and annoy the market foot goers like what one person did.
Yeah, or to kind of give a really simple example of what it would look like on a council level is, so you apply under the Planning Act, right? The Planning Act focuses on enabling urban development infrastructure. So the council assesses, does this meet zoning rules? Does it align with the spatial plan for growth? Are roads and utilities properly provided for? If the likely outcome for that, right, if it gets the ticks, gets the thumbs up, is that consent is going to be granted because development is consistent with land use goals. But if you were to apply step 2, if you would follow up on that and apply under the Natural Environment Act, which focuses on protecting freshwater and biodiversity, a different team within the same council or a different agency will assess, will stormwater pollute the river? Does it harm fish, spawning areas?
Is there enough capacity at the sewage treatment plant?
That's right. Does it comply with freshwater quality limits?
I think it's 2 of the 3 South Wairarapa towns have sewage capacity like that. At the moment, they can't take on new housing development. I'm not sure. I think it's Greytown can, and I think it's Featherston and Martinborough can't, because the sludge ponds
that were meant to be
desludged weren't desludged.
Yep.
And that's where the Natural Environment Act would sit there and go, so the planning department might say, build the house. And Natural Environments go, but you can't connect it to the sewage because there isn't enough capacity for it.
That's right. And of course, councils don't have the resources to make a new sewage plant or to add on to it or anything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something you can do instantly. I mean, some councils are smart, like Rangitikei District Council is merging the Bulls and the Martin sewage treatment plants into one brand new plant because that was cheaper than trying to build 2 new treatment plants and build a 15k pipe. But that's just because they've hit a point where they've had to do the job. Greytown and Greytown, Featherston and Martinborough aren't at that particular point at this stage where at the moment their treatment plant's fine, but they can't take on new capacity.
Yeah,
which means can't take on new growth, which means you can't get new ratepayers into the council to help boost the books.
Yeah, so I know what Julian Jed here is referring to, because having gone over that there is a lot of good stuff in here. There is things that are going to be simpler, but it's those uncertainties and the rushed process and the lack of consultation with iwi Māori and other groups that makes us go, you haven't really done the groundwork required to really get this over the line. You can't just go, right, to select committee. That's when we consult everyone. Because it's like, no, you need to do it properly.
Yeah. Okay, shall we move on to our next MP, Rachel Brooking?
Yep.
Madam Speaker.
Honourable Rachel Brooking.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And look, I will echo what the Minister just said about the very hard-working public servants involved in the creation of this bill and, of course, the legislation before it as well. And many of those people are the same people. I also want to touch on what the Minister was saying about environment and how the Resource Management Act has not done well for our environment. And I'm pleased to hear him say that, because I've heard the Prime Minister talk about these reforms only in growth terms. And if you just say yes, 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 yes to everything, there is a consequence. And if you say yes to lots of sediment runoff, then your rivers are going to be polluted and run off into the coastal environment, and there will be no fish. You know, these are obvious consequences that we can see. So I was pleased that the Minister was talking about the importance of our taiao. However, I'm worried, I have many worries about this bill that I, like the other bill, we do want to take to the Select Committee and interrogate, and note the Minister's last remarks about allocation systems, again, something we looked at last time as well. The regulatory takings provisions also apply to biodiversity protections, and that is of grave concern to the Labour Party, because of course we face a biodiversity emergency, Mr Speaker, not just a climate change one, and of course the two are very interlinked. So we need to be doing the best that we can to not only maintain our biodiversity, and there is talk in these bills of offsetting, but to improve our biodiversity, Mr Speaker. And this bill does seem to lack ambition in this area of biodiversity, and I note that the Minister said, well, if the goals aren't right, then that's something that the Select Committee will look at, and that's certainly something that we are interested in, that is increasing the ambition for our biodiversity. I'm also concerned about some ability to avoid bottom lines where they're not met. The point of bottom lines is that you have to meet them, and of course where those bottom lines are set is of foremost importance, and those processes are out of this primary legislation and will be done through secondary instruments. So we do need to make sure that we have the settings right, and I'm not sure that they are right in these bills, particularly as they relate to environmental bottom lines being set at the regional level and there being no national environmental bottom lines, that the national bottom lines relate to human health. It's another issue. I want to again talk about this relationship between this bill and the other bill, and I really think there is some thinking, and it was reflected in some of the Minister's comments there about the rural and urban settings in communities, that you can just neatly separate our environment from our urban cities, which of course include the environment in them. You cannot do that, and we see that when you have a urban development in a city without adequate protections for earthworks, and if there is going to be a flood, what happens to the dirt that's sitting there that's going to run into the drains and then run into the coast, that is an issue to do with river quality. If it goes into a stream and then it goes into the coast, but it is also an issue to do with urban environments and building the more houses that all of us want here. So we do need these two pieces of legislation talking to each other, and it would be better if they were in the one act. I'm also very concerned that we have not seen in these bills much talk about the importance of green spaces in the urban environment. We're saying you can do whatever you like on your property, we're not looking at urban amenity, but green spaces do a lot of heavy lifting around stormwater runoff, Mr Speaker, and we know with climate change that we're going to get more and more rain, so it's important that we have the mechanisms for those green spaces to, one, be required, and two, be paid for. This is a big issue. Also, I'm disappointed that these bills do not deal with climate pollution, and I think that they could. So in my final seconds, I am disappointed that these bills lack ambition for improving our environment, but I do want people to submit on them and to demonstrate the pollution that prevents us from swimming in rivers, from eating our mahinga kai and having safe drinking water.
I think we've managed to find out how to get the speed up properly. Sorry. On the keyboard mutes multiple things at once.
Any thoughts? Would you like to talk about what she just said or anything?
It is definitely mentioning flaws that are in the bill. The fact that it doesn't take into environmental pollution into the Act, where the current RMA actually does take that into there. And also the fact it doesn't help with the fact that the government is looking at scrapping regional councils, which are environmental watchdogs. But maybe with the way these bills are, the desire is for our environmental watchdogs to no longer be in the picture. And maybe that's a sign of a predetermined, a desired outcome. I wouldn't say a predetermined outcome, a desired outcome.
Yeah, I also find it quite interesting that, having gone over the RIS, that a lot of these things are not really formal. A lot of these decisions, a lot of these things relating to the environment itself are kind of more up in the air, like they're still in the process of being developed.
Yeah.
Which is a bit concerning. Like, if you've got a bill that's not quite fully fleshed out, it's just like, hello?
Is it like relying on the hypothetical idea of technology will solve it in the future?
That's the impression I'm getting from this.
Which seems to be a more right-leaning stance of, technology will deal with the environment when it comes to it, which is like a complete literal farce, because it's like you're banking on something that might not exist.
Yeah, that's right, and that's also one of the problems with this bill. Like, I was looking over the goal and, looking over the introduction of the bill, right? They say that's going to make it easier to get stuff done in the future by enabling delivery of high-quality infrastructure for the future, including doubling renewable energy, right? Well, okay, where does that put things like the ferries? Where does that put things like the offshore wind farm that's left? How are you going to do these things? How are you going to meet our environmental commitments when you want to make it easier to set up a mining pit? A lot of these goals, right? For anyone that's been to like uni and has to do like demonstrate that you can write down goals and that you can commit to the goals. That's something we had to do at Massey, right?
Yeah.
This wouldn't pass the sniff test, but this wouldn't actually pass because a lot of these goals are really open-ended and they're quite vague.
I mean, hey, they could put tax compliance in there and it would still probably meet the structure. Yeah,
like doubling energy production, right? Renewable energy production. By when? Yeah, exactly. But that's nice. That could be like, it's like, if it's 100 years by now, have you achieved your goal? Like, yeah, exactly. Like, where's the goal? Like, like the saying goes, they keep shifting the goalpost. Well, in this case, they're not putting the goalpost in the ground to have something to measure to. Yeah, and it's like there's another thing too, like adapting to the effects of climate change, okay, while reducing risks from natural hazards. What does that mean? Shouldn't we be trying to mitigate the effects of climate change? Yeah, exactly, yeah. Like, what do we mean? There's just little things like that I can just go in and go, well, adapting to the effects rather than mitigating the effects. Just the language does matter when you're putting these, when you're writing bills, because it's like, okay, that means, it's like, okay, we can adapt by having this road that's higher up off the ground than this previous road, but that's not actually reducing the amount of pollution that's contributing to the problem that we're seeing in the environment. It's things like that. It's I don't like these open-ended goals and this vague language that's in the bill. Yeah. Okay, let's get on to Huhana Linden.
Mr. Speaker.
Huhana Linden.
On behalf of Te Rōpū Kākāriki, I stand on behalf of our team as we consider this new legislation, the Natural Environment Bill. Now, we want to acknowledge Minister Bishop's efforts to keep us updated and the briefings received from officials. Acknowledging also, it's pleasing to see that water conservation orders are being kept. We acknowledge also the reduction in the number of plans as being good progress, and the greater reliance on the national direction is good. But it's just a matter of where we're going with the national direction, of course. As Te Rōpū Kākāriki, we are a party for Te Tiriti, for Te Taiao and for Te Ora o Te Tangata. And we acknowledge that the RMA has not been effective in protecting Te Taiao. But, we've been in the RMA for the last 2 years because of the repeals, and now we're back here. And as tangata whenua, Te Rōpū Kākāriki can see that the Te Tiriti provisions are not strong enough. And reducing the role of iwi Māori in this space is not good. Iwi Māori have been engaging for decades in the RMA, and as marae, as hapu and iwi, we are very used to that system and saw many layers and many examples of input from iwi Māori and haukainga. In this bill, it recognises the Crown's responsibility to Te Tiriti, but it's actually weaker than the original RMA. It doesn't go far enough. And in fact, it's relegating us as tangata whenua to consultation only. Now, it says that this legislation, we've heard that the legislation is there to provide a clearer role for tangata whenua within the new legislation. But that's not true really, because we don't even have a broad te tiriti clause from which we can provide our responses as tangata whenua in this space. And we can clearly see that there is a lack of decision-making input that iwi Māori have moving forward. Now, this legislation is no different to the fast track, where we've seen a hierarchy of Māori, those with Crown mandates, those with settlements, those that have statutory recognition, those with iwi hapu environmental management plans. That actually skips the opportunity to provide an inclusive way where iwi Māori as haukainga, whānau, hapu, marae iwi can input into the legislation, and that's a part of the wariness that we have in what is being provided for iwi Māori moving forward. Mana whakahono arohe have been a space where we've seen a lot of mana whakahono arohe come through. And in this legislation, it provides space for the existing agreements to be maintained and those that have been initiated previously. But we note there will be no new mana whakahono arohe agreements unless it's via treaty settlement. That's limiting, again, creating the hierarchy of Māori and how Māori enter the space for the regulation in taiao matters in this new piece of legislation. Many fishhooks and barriers will arise for iwi Māori as they come into the submission process. We invite the voice of impacted whānau, hapu, iwi and marae to provide voice to these very, very real issues that they've experienced over the years, and this could be an improvement if we had strengthened space for us to have shared decision making, shared input, and that all tangata whenua voices are included. That is not guaranteed in what is being provided. We have some worries in terms of our environmental bottom lines, and when we think about the regulatory relief or the form of compensation to come that prioritises te hunga whairawa, those who are the property owners, we get worried for councils because as they look to establish rules, whether it's for Indigenous biodiversity, significant natural areas or sites of significance to Māori, they're going to have to make payments of compensation. Who has the deep pūkoro to pay for this compensation is a big question that we have when it comes to the cap on rates that councils will have moving forward. Nā wai utu I nei nama hei ngā tau e tū mai nei. So there's heaps to do and there's plenty of concerns and we object. Kia ora.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well, that brings up a good point. Like, what happens if you're currently in negotiating a settlement but not have it yet granted? So that creates a bit of an issue for advisory capacity. But what happens if, say, council goes beyond that advisory capacity and let local mana whenua actually be part of the decision making, just like the RMA, and then say a big corporation comes in and goes, I don't like that. I gave David Seymour some backhanders, so I'm going to sue the council because they were naughty, naughty, naughty because they expressed the wrong form of freedoms and local discretionary tools, mate, and I don't like that.
Yeah, so who wins here? Is it the people, is it the local people on the ground, or is it the corporation?
Yeah, you know, and it's this act designed to help the corporations at the cost of the people.
Yeah, and the
cost of the ratepayers.
The other thing too that the RIS went over time and time again is that there was inadequate consultation or due to limited opportunity to engage with iwi Māori because it was a rushed process.
Yeah.
So when I looked at, the cost-benefit analysis, they said that, Māori as users will save $328 million in compliance costs. The core risk is the system's property rights focus clashes with treaty obligations, just like what you were saying before, which potentially will override collective Māori rights. So,
what happens when you got a local iwi that also not just consults with the local Māori, but consults with the local non-Māori who are part of the community to get the broader picture, who are on the same page.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I look at the windmill farm that some of the locals have been really upset about. But that local windmill farm was done not only in consultation with iwi, but it was also done in consultation with our town, Eki Tahuna. There was a full thing that went out for consultation, right? And that's really important. I do wonder now with these new rules and regulations, could a corporation just come in and just muscle out that consultation?
Yeah, exactly. You know, and are we prepared for that?
Yeah, if you're a libertarian like I am, a left-wing libertarian, you should be screaming into your pillow because this is a fucking nightmare.
Yeah. Okay, we should get to what looks like to be a bit of a lengthy speech from the ACT Party.
Mr. Speaker.
Simon Court.
The RMA has had its vice grip on New Zealand for far too long. Its integrated management approach fostered the falsehood that protecting the environment means resisting and delaying the necessary and inevitable growth. This Natural Environment Bill instead recognises the need for targeted legislation to protect the environment, not by resisting growth, but instead setting clear rules so that growth occurs within environmental limits. Intentionally focused on quite different matters, there are core consistencies with the planning bill, however, that reflect the common need for a paradigm shift away from the culture of can'ts to a culture of can-dos. Each bill has clear goals that set the objectives for the bill. These focus the system and funnel limits that flow down through the rest of the system, through national policy direction, through standards, environmental limits, natural environment plans, and then, where still needed, although much reduced, the need for permits. Public involvement will be front-loaded into higher-level processes and on important matters such as plan making and limit setting. This means the new permitting process will no longer have to reconcile either reckons or blessings from every Tom, Dick and Harriet and who aren't materially affected and don't live in the district or region. We also recognise that communities must have flexibility when expressing their priorities and values about the environment that are important to their region. That is why the limit setting process accommodates communities' social and economic aspirations as well as their aspirations for the environment, because stewardship is strongest when it recognises human needs, not when it denies them. The no net loss goal for biodiversity recognises opportunities to drive better biodiversity outcomes through offsetting in places where offsetting investments, biodiversity investments, are more impactful. Quite a contrast to the common RMA demand to protect things in place. It's a high-cost, low-benefit outcome which has not improved the environment. This RMA rigidity is something that our farmers have felt more broadly with regulations on their farms than any other sector. They've often faced costly, disproportionate and duplicative controls. For this reason, we've focused on a graduated approach to interventions on people's farms, so the government is only regulating what is necessary. This recognises the great work and the outcomes that our farmers frequently produce through their freshwater farm plans, through voluntary action on farm, and through the catchment groups that make wonderful efforts in their communities. And as with the planning bill, when it does come to imposing land use controls on farms, regulatory relief will play an important part in the culture shift we demand. Under the RMA, we've seen property rights trampled by councils imposing SNAs with a colouring in pen on people's private property. While biodiversity protection is a valid cause, it is for the public good nonetheless. And this practice has, under the RMA, had indiscriminate and disproportionate effects on private property owners. The bill's regulatory relief mechanism for biodiversity controls on private land ensures we have a mechanism that protects biodiversity where it matters and where a public good is such that councils can justify to their ratepayers the cost of the relief to the affected landowners. Then we have the low-cost planning tribunal. This is intended to combat any legacy RMA inertia, because people need a referee on the field to police things like disproportionate demands for consents, unfettered information requests, and insufficient regulatory relief, all of which have been rife under the RMA and which must end in the system we're replacing it with. Finally, sitting atop all of this are the procedural principles that will drive the discipline that has been so lacking in our planning system, with proportionality being of particular importance to drive the culture shift. Mr. Speaker, the Natural Environment Bill shows how we can protect our environment in a balanced, proportionate and rational way. I commend this bill to the House.
Good on you, Simon Court. That sounded like a functionable speech. Don't agree with a lot of everything that was said into it. It's a shame that you refer to as the cannots as being cuts, which I think is a bit misleading. And rather, it should be that focus from the cannots to the can-dos.
I could quote Brooke Van Velden, but I don't know if we would get censored. But yeah, putting the N back in cuts, that's all I'll say. But yeah, I mean, look, let's go to the notes. Okay, so this is where I got confused too reading the bill, because the bill says no net loss in biodiversity, but we can look at other bills, right? Like the amendments to the Wildlife Act that allow for the incidental killing of native wildlife, including kiwis. And we've got, we've got mining operations that in development of roads and stuff like that, that will directly impact their natural habitats, like mining operations such as those proposed on the West Coast, Denniston Plateau, destroy habitat of threatened species, like our great spotted kiwi. You talk about no net loss. Are you going to try and compensate for that by having a massive breeding program to go, oh, look, the numbers all balance out. We've replaced all the killed kiwis with these lovely new kiwis that were bred in captivity. However, we cut funding to DOC. So how the fuck are we going to achieve that? Is it just going to come from the private markets? The private market going to start breeding kiwis? Like, what are we going to do? Like, my God, I know that's a right-wing libertarian.
Maybe they're going to sit there and say Wellington ratepayers are going to pay for it with Wellington Zoo and Zealandia doing the breeding. Yeah, I'm sure my brother Zach would have quite a few things to say about that. He works at Pukaha. He works with Kiwi. But anyways, so go on to his other points, right? The 14.8 billion savings figures that Simons rely on is highly uncertain and excludes environmental costs, right? The RIS didn't look at the environmental costs with this bill. The regulatory relief that he talked about is a major unfunded liability. And will that result in increased insurance premiums?
Exactly. Yes, I suspect it will increase the rate of insurance, especially for those living in farming communities. But asking how, I have to ask, how will central government's net 1.58 billion cost? So that's 444 million in setup and 1.14 billion ongoing. How's that going to be paid for? How are they going to pay for that?
With monopoly money?
I have no fucking idea.
I think they're going to pay for it with monopoly money.
Yeah, it's just like...
And you're going to hope they get a lot of chance and community chest cards out.
Are they going to sell assets?
Go to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200.
Like, look, we could probably pay for this if they just legalized weed, like good libertarians should. Like, I'm a left-wing libertarian, legalize the weed. We can get a lot of tax revenue off that.
Sounds like a great plan, yeah. Okay, let's get on to Mark Patterson.
Speaker.
The Honourable Mark Patterson.
I rise to offer New Zealand First's full-hearted support for this Natural Environment Bill. Today we do start the process of untackling our primary sector and the rural communities that depend on them. And in case anyone is under any doubt in this House how important that is, the Sophie report, the situation outlook for primary industries this morning, 83%, Grant McCullum's holding it up, 83% of New Zealand's merchandise exports, some $62 billion. It does not get bigger than that for New Zealand, so we have to have a planning system that is fit for purpose. And their RMA was not that. It may have been at one point and a well-meaning document and well-intended, but it has metastasised into a planning behemoth, a labyrinth of complex rules and interpretations, some 100 plans across the country. It has been the biggest issue, actually, when we're out and about talking to farmers. The absolute frustration, Mr. Speaker, it's absolutely perplexed as how they were going to get through the system. Tens of thousands of dollars, years in some cases, spurious disputes and complaints holding up processes. There was quite a, David Clark was quite outspoken about this. He was brave enough to come out and put his actual situation into the media to show the general public what it was. And many of us know David, many of us have been on his farm. He is probably one of the best, if not the best, arable farmer in Canterbury, unable to get through a system. And paradoxically, the only way he probably could have got through under the old system or the current system before we made our changes the other day to roll over in a preliminary matter, the only way I could have got through was converting to dairy. So the rules had completely broken. So tens of thousands of dollars, opaque, a lot of duplication of administration, enormous frustration. There was impingement on property rights, and SNAs had been referenced where councils, even if they didn't want to, had to come on and identify areas that may or may not be SNAs. And that land could essentially be confiscated. Farmers were not in a position to argue about that. If it's an SNA, it's an SNA. Some of them looked pretty like just a little bit of scrub and manuka, but nevertheless, if they're an SNA, and this legislation would allow us to compensate. I think the Select Committee needs to look at that, and I've heard the opposition look at it, where those thresholds are. We don't want to get into a point where we can be extorted as a government, either in the heritage or in the biodiversity space, but there is some room to move there, where if you have had a property right taken, that you might be compensated by no rates, for example, on that particular block of land. The new rules set the national directions. They must much clearer. There's still regional plans that will sit under that, 17 regional plans where there is a degree of flexibility, and there needs to be. Again, in Canterbury, we had the ridiculous situation where the natural water coming out of the bush in the hills was at a higher level than the current national bottom lines. It was completely unobtainable, and that's just dispiriting to those farmers and landowners who really did want to maintain their environment, but we're in an impossible situation. So there is some flexibility there. There is a planning tribunal for a triage. And of course, we know there's so much good work going on in our catchment groups, the Kiwi2 trusts, and farmers will have freshwater farm plans. So there's certainly still checks and balances there, and they will be auditable. The one thing I did want to flag too, New Zealand First has caution around the market base for allocation, or the market allocation system. That has been, frankly, a disaster in places like the Murray-Darling Basin in Australia and parts of America. So the Select Committee will have to look at that very, very carefully. I know that's within the farming sector, that's also pretty controversial, and the Select Committee will get a range of views on that. So I think we need to be really cautious. We're not going down a Milton Freeman path that doesn't actually work in practice. Yes! But New Zealand First is absolutely delighted to support this bill. Thank you.
Oh God, you know what? Every time I listen to New Zealand First, I need to put on a neck brace because I get so much damn whiplash because, yeah, he was not wrong.
We don't want our water resources to be going out to the highest bidder, but also at the same time, is this a time where for commercial gain should it be royalties should be placed on it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he made quite a number of really good points there. I just like the fact that he just shat on Milton Friedman, a guy that we should not apply to environmental resources, or you know, he's one of the granddaddies of trickle down economics. Yeah, so
a trickle down that somehow just doesn't go down.
It doesn't go down. No, the trickle down defies gravity. Look, I agree with Mark that consenting sucks. The consent process sucks. And now I need to put on my coalition blue-green hat or whatever. I don't have one, but anyways, because for once, actually no, multiple times I've agreed with NZ First. They bring up some good points.
Mark Patterson, we probably agree with Mark Patterson more than we probably agree with the rest of the crew, because Mark Patterson is that, how do I call it? He's part of the Tracy Martin Remark part of New Zealand First that went when this new coalition came in, but he's the remnant from that previous era of New Zealand First we like.
Look, can we just clone him? Because Shane Jones does my absolute bloody head in. But anyways, I agree with him that consenting has become more complex. The national monitoring system showed that the median time taken by local authorities to reach a decision on a consent application has actually increased by 50%. And that was from 2014 to 2015, and then again in 2018 to 19. So it's interesting because this is not necessarily the direct impact or the direct result of the RMA existing, right? There's other pieces of legislation that have come in and other constraints that have also come in and other different cultural changes that have occurred that has made the consenting process longer and costs more, right? That's what I found reading it. So the time taken by local authorities to reach a decision on consent applications for infrastructure projects has increased by a whopping 150%. So, and that was between 2010 to 14 compared to 2015 to 19. So why is this happening? Well, it's happening for three key reasons, right? Councils are considering a wider range of potential impacts from infrastructure projects. That's the first one. Yeah. 2, councils are requiring more evidence about those impacts. Okay. And 3, communities have less tolerance of impacts. So I can give you an example. Like consents for marine dredging now require support analysis and potential mitigation steps on the impact of noise on marine life, which is an impact that wasn't well understood until recently. So as we get more data coming through about, okay, this could have a negative impact on our wildlife or negative impact on people or a negative impact on te tiriti relations, if that results in more time having to be taken to get additional data to understand where the costs and benefits are, what are the risks, what are the long-term impacts, right? So it's become more complicated, but that's not necessarily because of the RMA. That's more or less that is due to just more data coming out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and that is something that has come up. Dredging is a great example of like people go, oh, we used to dredge the water and we never had the flooding problems. Now we've got flooding problems because we stopped dredging the water. But at the same time, what was the dredging doing? That is the reason why we stopped dredging the rivers.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the RMA does need replacing. No doubt about it, right? Because we need
the Arms Act.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the Arms Act, right? It needs a good cleanup. Like we need about 104 billion more public capital to meet the current shortfall in our infrastructure. And if we keep investing at the current rate, we will not keep up with renewals and future demand. We will actually be short by another 1.6 billion in 30 years' time. So we do need to build stuff, right?
Yeah.
But how we go about it and what we're building, like, for example, if we're prioritizing roads over public transport, okay, that's going to just add on to more costs because we can't just build our way out of a deficit, right? We also have to encourage people to change some of their behaviors so we can save money in the long term. Public transport is cheaper for everyone.
Such as maybe riding a bike
or taking the train
to a child at hospital instead of taking the car.
Or taking the train, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you know, my local MP, Julie, that's exactly what Julian Genter did. On both occasions, she rode a bike, which means when her bike got to the hospital, it didn't clog up a car park.
That's right.
Which means someone else who couldn't get there, who had to get there by car, had a car park available.
Exactly. And this is why it's so important to have walkable cities. I know people freak out when they hear 15-minute city, 15-minute woke city. We can't do woke city. And I'm like, why don't you want a woke city? Like,
it's like saying to my friend Tony, we can't do 15-minute cities, so you should be locked up in your home.
What?
You know?
No one wants you locked up.
We can't be locked up in our own cities. You know, because that's something like, if you're in the disabled community, 15-minute cities are ideal.
Absolutely. Like, you're not going to be locked up in your home. If anything, you're going to want to get out of your home. Everything's within 15 minutes walking distance. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. But you know how some people, how some people like, they just, they see 15-minute cities, and I remember New Zealand First Law candidate trying to convince me that's the plan for Hamilton, that you wouldn't be able to get from Hamilton East to Hamilton West.
Why not?
Yeah, and it's like, but they haven't got there in the detail. Like that, you're dealing with conspiracy theory cases.
I mean, we're still going to have buses and trains and light rail and bicycle lanes. Like, come on, we can just have things. Don't you want things closer to you? Like, technically, the supermarket for me is only 10 minutes walk away. Don't you want to be able to walk to the supermarket within 10 minutes? Don't you want to be able to walk
I can walk to my life. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Newtown, I don't drive there.
No.
I remember one time coming back, driving home, getting out of the car and walking to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even home. Like, I just got home, sat there, locked up the car and walked to the supermarket because the supermarket is so close.
Yeah. So again, we can't build our way out of a deficit, but we still need to invest in public infrastructure, and we can invest in public infrastructure that in the long term saves money, like your trains, like your bus lanes, like your bicycle lanes, people that encourage people to use cost-effective modes of transport. That's just one example. We could look at flats, for example, so or social housing,
multi-dwelling developments.
Yeah, multi-dwelling developments. Things like that.
Maybe we could get that MP across the electoral boundary in Mount Cook, Tamiford Pool, to try and lobby Chris Bishop to get on with Arlington.
Yeah.
Actually, she's already been doing that, but, besides the point, maybe it's a bit more time on there. I do like this comment here. Lol, walking hills suck. Yes, I know that. That's what... I completely know that. Because I know when I lived in Owen Street, I would walk I'll walk out behind the hospital, down Hospital Road and along Adelaide Road. When I came back, I used to walk along Adelaide Road, down Ridderford Street, through Newtown School, up Wilson Street, back into Owen Street.
Hey, look, here's the plus side. You don't need a gym membership if you're walking those hills. You could be even running up those hills to Cape Bush,
Oh, God, yes, yeah. Okay, let's get on to Debbie Ngariwa Packer.
Debbie Ngariwa Packer.
I think when we have legislation come to the House, it's really important that we test those who it most affects on how it's going to land, if it's going to land at all. And certainly hearing from Tainui, this bill is a flop. And when we have someone as esteemed and illustrious as Tainui, who have said, actually, we're so upset by it, we're going to go to court, it does caution on what the government's agenda is really going to be. The bill has been sold to the nation as a reset, like a clean break from the RMA, but in fact, it may be for some, but it's a modern system that's going to protect some. But for Māori, for iwi, for hapu, for mana whenua, for grassroots communities, the real question is who's going to hold the power and who bears the risk? Because certainly that's some of the questions that we've been hearing. What the bill is really doing is, at the heart, the Natural Environment Bill centralising control. And so it replaces local decision-making with a funnel that starts at, guess where, Wellington. And we've got ministers that are setting national limits. National policy direction are being shaped by these ministers. Regional plans are locked in decisions for 30 plus years. There's all sorts of things that really alert iwi. And when we've got that kind of narrative coming out, and we're going to be in a situation where we don't get to challenge bad projects and things, and the bars are all being messed up, it is really concerning that a bill of this nature is adversely affecting iwi, who are being seen as the economic solution for this nation, who lead with great partnerships, who have shown goodwill and great relationships with many a government, including reaching out to this one here. And where we've got vague language where Māori rights are being tweaked, again, as I said earlier, the uncertainty that's at risk here, it's really hard to understand who's going to, well, it's really easy, to be honest, to understand who's going to be able to benefit from this and who's not. So the bill includes a whole lot of environmental limits, but again, we emphasise to our whānau out there that those limits are being determined by ministers. And while ministers can override councils and intervene in plans, environmental protection then becomes worryingly political. And for many iwi whānau hapu mana whenua, we know what happens when politics start to interfere in the values of looking after our environment, because environment for Māori is not something that stands alone. It's something that we're intrinsically related to and connected to. So it is concerning enough for us to be able to caution our whānau out there to be ready to submit and to make sure that we have a really clear understanding about this bill. It has watered down really critical language such as talks a lot about Māori participation. Participation is not the same as partnership as intended in the settlements, and what it also does is provide uncertainty for those iwi who have yet to settle, an assumption that their rights only exist when settlement happens was actually badly incorrect. So we are concerned about the way that this bill opens the door to first in, first served, and treaty rights are not explicitly protected. And again, we risk seeing our taonga turned into commodities for the sake of jobs and economic development. And when we're in those situations, we're actually outbidding short-term gain for whakapapa long-term pain. And I think what the bill has failed to do is recognise Māori proprietary rights in freshwater, geothermal resources that leave long-standing Māori iwi mana whenua claims unresolved. So yes, the bill introduces all sorts of changes that could be celebrated by this government, but it doesn't do anything to respect the treaty relationship that the government is obligated to. We don't oppose reform. But we oppose reform that recentralises power and weakens Māori authority and sidelines communities. So a system that claims to protect environment while limiting community voice is never a model that should be celebrated by any government. It's not transformational, it's actually managerial. So our message to our whānau is to stay alert, to stay engaged, and do not be silenced by the complexity of the bills before you. And we look forward to seeing this come into the House for the second reading in the Select Committee, and we oppose it as it is.
Yep, she pretty much reflected everything that was in the RIS relating to treaty issues, because I do like the point that she said that this concentrates power to central government, because for a coalition, right, coalition government that advocates for small government, this is not really upholding that idea of small government, because if you, at least from a libertarian perspective, small government refers to local government, right, and people power. It doesn't refer to a hierarchy of power, like a top-down approach. That's a very American way
of governance out of the structure.
Less government, right? When you've got, doesn't necessarily mean less people. It means a more spread out distribution of power amongst the citizens, rather than concentrated into the hands of ministers. And I really like the fact that Debbie brought that up, because when you have good partnerships with iwi, that is decentralizing power. When councils, iwi, and central government are all working together as partners. That's how it should be. But at the moment, power's been taken away from iwi, power's been taken away from local councils, and it's been concentrated into central government. And that really, I know people go, oh, crazy libertarian over here. But it's true. I worry a lot about that, because we're breaking down that relationship between citizens and those that are being elected to represent us.
Okay, let's get on to super chats, because we've done 6 speeches.
Alrighty. Oh, I like Kiwibirb's cat. I like my cat too. I think he's a good cat. You're a good quality cat. Oh, he's purring now. He's lying on my bed and he's purring away when I said that to him. By the way, I spoke with some doctors today about New Zealand drug laws and the need to change. They think medical cannabis should be available for serious health conditions. I agree. I don't think the government should really be standing in the way between a doctor and their patient, unless, of course, they've got data to show, like empirical evidence to show that, hey, a certain medication could cause more harm than good.
And more from Lord Alex of Super Chats. Chris Bishop on Facebook the other day answering concerns about the Gilbert Bush and Seta Nostra Park on Petone Granite. People are not happy with the route and the project being fast-tracked. And I was like, I can also confirm from reading in the Newlands community groups on Facebook, some people want to object to it is because Newlands won't have its own on-off ramp or connection into it. Not like they realised they could put in a submission that could put that in there. And it would be very logical if you could sit there and link it into, have it link up with Woodridge Road anyway. But considering Woodridge Road is meant to ultimately connect up to Granada Drive, who knows when that's going to happen. I mean, it took 30 years from when Winchester Road East actually connected up to Mark Ave. So, and that's just me, local knowledge. I can tell you, Laura's probably thinking like, what's the name of these streets?
Where are these streets? Yeah.
Yeah. So that is local knowledge there of me. knowing the area, and yes, I do with my work. I do frequently drive along Woodridge Drive, Granada Drive, and Mark Ave, and remember going a lot to Guadalupe Crescent, which I quite often do now. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for the $20 in super chats.
Yes, and thank you
very much appreciated.
Yeah. So okay, so let's now I've just got to do this whole refresh thing because it's trying to get used to a new speed control system. Okay, so let's get on to the other piece of legislation known as the planning bill. Since we've just finished with the natural environments one, and let's get off to the bush.
Is open to doing business with our friends around the world.
Speaker, I present a legislative statement for the planning bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website. The Honourable Chris Bishop.
I move that the planning bill be now read a first time, and I nominate the Environment Committee to consider the bill. At the appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill be reported to the House by 26 June 2026. And for the avoidance of doubt, that is beyond the 6-month window. I'm not seeking to shorten the report back, but I think it will give the committee a bit of extra time, just with the way the House schedule is looking for next year, to consider things properly and for full consideration. Mr Speaker, I am genuinely very proud to be here moving this first reading, and it is the culmination just before Christmas of 2 years of hard work, along with many ministers in the government and of course my erstwhile Under-Secretary Simon Court from the ACT Party. This has been very much a team effort across the coalition when it comes to planning and environmental reform, and we have worked together cohesively and coherently. I think it is now understood, sir, that for 30 years or so the RMA has tried to do everything in one law: planning, resource management, environmental protection. It simply hasn't worked. The RMA is the root cause of our housing crisis. It's made it difficult and expensive to build infrastructure and energy projects we need. It's tied farmers and growers up in red tape, and it has not protected the environment. These bills that we are debating today, the planning bill before us right now and the natural environment bill, are the opportunity for New Zealand to unshackle itself from a failed system. We are going to, through this bill in particular, restore the freedom for New Zealanders to shape their own future by that radical concept to some known as property rights. And it was interesting, Mr Speaker, I did a morning report interview last week, and Corin Dan, the interviewer, said, well, this is all interesting and very radical. Why are property rights important? I was a bit struck dumb for a few seconds, because in a funny way it's so intuitively obvious why property rights are important that I was a bit taken aback. Property rights are important because they are the foundation of a market economy. It is difficult to have a proper price mechanism and the allocation of goods and resources based around price without sound property. And we've had experiments in the world and economies run not on price and not on the basis of private property being the foundation stone of that economy. And generally they haven't gone very well.
No, three.
Well, all of the Soviet bloc from 1945 through to roughly 1989. In contrast to countries that embrace private property and market-based economies tend to do better. Now, I didn't intend to start my speech by echoing the great battles of the 1980s, but it seems to be there seems to be that period of time just before Christmas in December to recast those battles. Anyway, the planning system, this new planning system, is going to radically change how we build our houses and infrastructure. And I want this speech and the speeches to come to be an articulation of Parliament's intent. The planning bill and the natural environment bill have been designed deliberately, sir. But a planning bill for planning and regulating how land is used, developed and enjoyed, and another for protecting and enhancing the natural environment. Not every development has an environmental impact. It does not need to be caught up in a natural environment regime. The planning bill that's before us now is critical to accelerating housing and infrastructure delivery. The bill introduces a significant change in what gets regulated, so more things can be done without needing a consent and allowing more people to enjoy their land. We estimate we can cut consent volumes by up to 46%. Now that's an estimate. It's been done by officials, and I'm sure the Environment Committee will want to test that work over the course of their consideration of this bill. But that itself is a radical reduction in the number of times that people need to ask permission from the local council to do things. So the shift is delivered in three ways. We're narrowing or proposing to narrow the range of effects that councils can regulate. So we need to focus the planning system on real impacts. Things like noise and vibration and shading. Those are legitimate things that the planning system should consider. But the bill contains a list of effects that are deliberately out of scope. Interior changes, apartment layouts, private views, things that do not affect others are out of scope. We need to get little council planners investigating every element of everyone's house. They need to lay off. The bill lifts the threshold for consent. Everyday projects like building a deck or a garage won't need a consent if they have no or less than minor effects. That is a change to the status quo. The bill introduces the framework for standardised zones and rules. We have 1,100 different zones currently in use in New Zealand, around 1,175 I'm advised, so we can introduce greater consistency nationwide. There are 100 plans prepared under the RMA. The bill will reduce that number to 17. Reducing the number of plans to regional combined plans, standardising content via national direction and standards will create a faster, more consistent planning process. I do want to take a moment to explain the core structure of this bill and the Natural Environment Bill, because the architecture is what drives the system. It sets the hierarchy, locks in certainty and ensures every part of the process aligns to faster, clearer decisions. We've been calling this the funnel. It's a clear, deliberate hierarchy, or a funnel, that clarifies decision-making from national goals down to local actions. The structure is designed to close the door on unnecessary relitigation and provide certainty. The new system starts with bills having a tightly defined purpose. This is quite a contrast from the RMA, which has a long and confusing purpose clause and requires everything to be looked at through a sustainable management lens. The purpose clauses in the Planning Bill and the Natural Environment Bill aim to avoid that. From there, the Planning Bill and the Natural Environment Bill have clear goals that set the objectives for the system. These focus the system. If it's not in the goals, it is not part of the new planning system. The goals do not have an inherent hierarchy within them. No goal is more important than another. The order does not indicate a hierarchy. So for the next High Court judge that considers this issue, once the bill is passed into law, there is no hierarchy. Members can see for themselves the goals of the Planning Bill. The goals we have devised are enabling and positively framed. This is done specifically and deliberately. We want people in the system to behave in that way. We've taken great care to ensure that each and every one is required to be in the primary legislation. I've no doubt that the committee will kick that around and I look forward to that. Under the goals sits national policy direction. This particularises the goals. It's the way for the government to set clear expectations of councils and system users and define what must be achieved. Every goal will have accompanying national direction to particularise and explain them. With these measures in place, everyone will know exactly what is expected. Beneath national policy direction are national standards. They set out how national policy direction should be implemented through the combined plans, how councils develop the plans and what people can do when doing certain activities. National standards must implement national policy direction. Below that are regional spatial plans, which are within regional combined plans. They play a key role in the system. They're the place where strategic trade-offs are made about how land and natural resources are used. Regional spatial plans have to implement national standards. There will be a land use chapter under this bill and a natural environment chapter, which is the Natural Environment Bill. These govern local actions and rules. And here is the critical point, sir. Land use and natural environment chapters must implement regional spatial plans and national standards. Each instrument is built on the one above it. This is not guidance, it's a legal requirement. And then there are consents under the Planning Bill and permits under the Natural Environment Bill. The impact of the funnel means that the consenting authority cannot refer back up to or relitigate any direction made in the instruments that sit higher up in the system. When decision makers act under the bill, they begin by looking at the instrument directly relevant to the issue at hand, only looking upward in the hierarchy if there's something missing, unclear or in conflict. This ensures that every decision follows the hierarchy, with each layer reinforcing the next with clarity and consistency from top to bottom. This is a decisive shift from the past, ensuring that every decision is anchored in clear, enforceable direction from the top down. It does mean greater responsibility on the government for robust and effective national instruments. That has not been in place under the RMA, or certainly not over the last 20 years in particular. We will be doing that through the new system. I'm going to let my colleague Simon Court and others to follow talk about other areas of the bill. These are substantive changes, sir, and I'm looking forward to the consideration by the committee.
It sounds like they're taking a fair bit of things out of there, such as getting the council out of what carpet shade you had to sit there and have there, or whether you have tiles in the bathroom. But did you get that sort of impression?
I got the impression that that Bishop doesn't understand how free markets work, and the fact that we have yes, you can have a socialist country and have a free market. Those two things are not incompatible. By the way, for the record, New Zealand is a mixed market economy.
Exactly. And has been probably since the 80s, has been a true mixed market economy.
Yeah, like we've got worker-owned co-ops in New Zealand. People can freak out and go, "Oh, that's a socialism." It's like, yeah, it's a socialism. Guess what?
We're technically
still functioning as a country.
Fonterra literally is kind of like that. I wouldn't call it a worker-owned cooperative, but Fonterra is an example of a producer-owned cooperative.
Yeah, we can look about private property. I'll put on my communist hat. There we go. Perfect. Okay, right. Now I've put on my made in China communist hat. Okay, so in socialism, the key difference between private property is defined as the means of productions like factories and large farms and mines, which is socially owned for collective benefit and for personal property. So you like your toothbrush, your clothes, and your home and car, which remains individually owned for personal use. So private property is not really a thing in socialism. So instead of having a privately owned farm, so Grant McCallum having his own farm, his own private property, that farm would actually be owned by the workers, right? The profits would be distributed
by Grant's employees, who he claims he is not stealing wages from.
Yeah, so basically it would be a worker-owned farm, okay?
Yeah.
So that's the difference. It's not a Grant McCallum-owned farm. That farm belongs to the farm hands that work the farm, right? They all have shares in the farm. That is socialism. Is that compatible for free market? 100%. Yes. You can have market pressures that demand, like, okay, we need to produce this, or the customers want you to produce this. Go and produce that. Okay, we're going to...
If we go deep down, back, like, this is going back into the, was it 70s? The Dairy Board of New Zealand was the agent for the car brand Lada, because the Soviet Union, they were cash poor but resource rich. So often in order to sell milk to Russia, we would exchange goods in return, and one of them was Lada cars.
Yep.
And that was something we had. Now, Ladas you won't see on the market now at all, because it's a thing of the Soviet Union, and Russia no longer is part of that, and it's evolved. But that was something that did actually happen in the form of, the New Zealand Dairy Board was the agent for the car brand Lada, which is sounds a bit weird, because dairy is meant to be agriculture, not farm. I mean, I wonder also at the same time, were they also the agent for the John Deere tractors and the Massey Ferguson tractors?
Yeah, but yeah, I just want to point that out, because it kind of does my head in when neoliberals try to describe what socialism is, because it's like, it's about worker-owned businesses. It's not about government just does stuff and yay, we have a socialism. No, governments do stuff around the world. They're not socialist. It's just all about who owns what. That's the only. That's really it. It's not a hard concept. Anyways, getting back on the bill, I agree. Kind of still wearing my socialist hat. Why are we charging consent fees and stuff like that for people to improve their own personal property? Right, a house, something that you live in, that is your personal property. Why do you need resource consents for a new deck? I don't know.
I don't even know if that. I wonder if that's been confused between a resource consent and a building permit.
Yeah, I think it is.
I think that's the problem, is a lot of people misunderstand that. A building permit is to draw up your plans, have an expert known as a building inspector go over to say, yes, the designs are correct, or no, they're not, suggest adjustments, and go from there. And for building permits, if it was less than a metre high, it wouldn't necessarily need a building permit structure to be done. So it only needed it if it was more than a metre high, it would need a building permit.
Yeah, because no one wants to fall through a deck and break their leg, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and what would come in is you'll have the inspection go through to say that the deck and sign it off. And I wonder if a lot of people mistake building permits for full-scale resource consents. Yeah. And I think that's half the problem, is a lot of people are confused by that, because they consider, like that, and because I've heard people go like, oh, I need a resource consent for that, and I'm like, feeling like, that doesn't sound like you need a resource consent for that. It sounds like a building permit. Well, and a building permit is making sure that your structure is safe and will live to the expected lifetime of the product. Is meant to last. I mean, average dwelling size is meant to have an estimated life of 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, the other example I can bring up too is I've got friends that are farmers. They want to fence off their waterways and they need a resource consent for that. It's like, I agree. When it comes to environmental things, we need to have a better system for that, because it shouldn't have to cost an arm and a leg to get a permission to fence off your wetlands.
That should just be a building permit.
Yeah.
Or a building permit that's possibly in a higher tier structure, because it probably has a lot more that needs to go into it.
Yeah, you need to have someone that can assess it environmentally. Like, okay, and we're making sure we're not building the fence.
You're getting, instead of just having a building inspector out there, you might have to have two people out there for different expertise to go into it, to also assess things like the runoff, whether there's planting along there, which I do also can tell you, many regional councils will give you the plants free of charge to put along your stream as part of fencing in your waterways. They will give you the plants to absorb the nitrate to reduce nitrate runoffs into the river free of charge.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the people that are watching now. I think I scared off a bunch of people as soon as I put this hat on. Maybe if I take it off, more people come back.
Who knows? Who knows?
But anyways,
I mean,
yeah.
put it this way, I think we've got, what do you call it, the Frontier on Twitch, Kiwi Skirt, and Mr. Alex, I think, are definitely watching at the moment. Of seeing free on there, I think they are definitely free that are watching at the moment.
Yeah, but yes, I do agree that 5.5% of your total project spend is a bit much to get a damn permit, to get a resource consent. It shouldn't have to cost that much, and it's very clear that the costs are quite regressive. So if you've got a small project that's under $200,000, you're going to spend more than the person who's got a couple $1 million project. Let's say they're a big developer and you're a person that just wants to build a house. Like it's obviously not fair. It's just, we need to have a progressive system.
Yeah, it is possibly where it needs to, it's possibly the fee structure not right. Yeah, I'm wondering if that's the thing. Is the fee structure just not fit for purpose? Are the cost recoveries not actually recovering to an adequate level for councils?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking, reading through this, because I looked at a case study, clearing gravel from a stream bed, right? Okay, this is quite important environmentally, right? And also for water infrastructure and whatnot. So basically what happened is a council-owned water infrastructure firm sought out a resource consent to clear some gravel that built up on the bed of a small stream in order to maintain the water course. This was a small piece of work that would have cost no more than $3,500 to complete, right? Including $2,000 to scope and design the work and $1,500 to remove the gravel. Okay, that sounds very reasonable. Now we look at the consenting costs. The consenting costs in this instance came to $7,500, which made up 68% of the project. That was more than twice the entire cost of physically undertaking the work. And this was because the council required external advice on the potential impact of the work on the aquatic environment. So, yeah, there's like the costs there coming from having to grab in someone from the outside rather than having in-house expertise. And I've gone over this in the past, that we need to support councils in developing their in-house expertise.
Yeah.
That would help lower costs.
Well, I mean, the other one is, and I wonder who actually had to pay for the consent for what? Was it the city or district council having to pay the regional council? That would be the interesting part. Go on there. Okay, let's move on to our second speaker, Rachel Brooking.
The question is, the motion be agreed to. Mr. Speaker. I call on the Honourable Rachel Brooking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And unlike the Minister, I only have 5 minutes, so I will not undertake a treatise of where property rights have or have not worked with market economies, but will note that property rights does not deal with the issue of common resources such as air, water and biodiversity. I'll leave that there. Now, of course, Madam Speaker, it was very disappointing to hear last Tuesday the Prime Minister say that this was the first government to address resource management. Of course, in the last government, the Labor government repealed the RMA, and this government brought it back 2 years ago when this government repealed the Spatial Planning Act and the Natural and Built Environments Act. Madam Speaker, they were two acts, and the rationale for that was that the spatial plans might be able to, at some point, link in with infrastructure funding, so they could be in a separate act to the rest of the act, which was a replacement for the Resource Management Act. What this government has done has split the Resource Management Act in two, one looking at the functions really of a regional council, and we'll get to that bill shortly, and one more looking at the functions of a district council, being the planning bill. I say that this is unnecessary and oversimplifies an idea that development does not impact the environment and that you can neatly put the environment to one side. However, we will have that discussion in Select Committee. I do want to note that this emphasis on private property rights and regulatory takings is very troubling to the Labor Party. We are troubled that it will have a chilling effect because councils will be required to compensate for protections in the Planning Act on heritage and landscape, and that will result in there being no protections. We are also note, and it is very frustrating, that there are many similarities with the legislation, and this government could have spent perhaps a month or so reviewing what we did to make some changes, but instead they repealed it, have amended the RMA time and time again to enable more pollution and stop councils from doing their jobs, and have then come up with a new planning bill that will not be passed until sometime late next year. I'm also very disappointed in the differences between this legislation and Labour's legislation about the role of mana whenua, Madam Speaker. It is a great diminishment between our legislation and their legislation, but I also suspect, and this is something that we'll be asking at Select Committee, that it is a diminishment even from the Resource Management Act into this legislation, which is taking us in totally the wrong direction, Madam Speaker. But I will now turn to many similarities in terms of the importance of spatial plans, the importance of moving a lot of the GDP in the system away from consent by consent decisions up into the plans and into the national direction, the efficiencies that can be gained from not considering urban amenity. These are things that we also did, having the plans, having one plan. You can argue about the chapters and things in the plans per region and keeping it at that regional scale with the councils working together. These are all similarities. Having stronger compliance, monitoring, enforcement, these are good things as well. So there is a lot that this government has replicated in these plans, but obviously with some very important differences that we will discuss at the Select Committee. Talking of the Select Committee, it's going to the Environment Select Committee, that is good, and I very much hope that the government members will enable a longer time for submissions, given that this is going over the Christmas break. Our legislation, also similar timing, and there was 11 weeks given, I believe, for submissions. So I encourage them to do that, and also to look at the bills together, so to enable people to not necessarily have to identify which bill they are submitting on. And I think it would be very good also to have the Ministry for the Environment's briefing and public session as well, because resource management law is difficult, Madam Speaker, and we, the Labour Party, are the grown-ups in the room over this, and so we will be supporting sending this to Select Committee.
Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a qualified urban planner,
I would be the first. John, that went very quick.
Yeah, so to echo Rachel Brooking's point, look, she is right. You can just probably make one submission in response to both of these bills because they go hand in hand.
That's how they're encouraging it as well.
Yep, because reading through the regulatory impact statement, it's pretty much just a big summary of both the bills and potential issues within them. Like they even state themselves that this would have been better off just being one bill. So you can put that in a submission, going, I agree with the ministry that this should be one bill, not two separate bills, because that creates potential duplication issues, which increase costs and time to get consents and whatnot, blah-de-blah-de-blah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like the fact that she brought up council costs. This is valid. The cost-benefit analysis shows councils get 4.9 billion in admin savings, but face an extra 109 million in new compliance monitoring costs. So adding compensation liabilities would be a major unfunded burden. So what you just brought up before, it's like, okay, you got iwi interests and then you got corporate interests, right? Are they going to have a death match in the ring and fight over natural resources? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and also, how much it could be protracted in litigation, considering, this is on the alcohol reform bill. Countdown, now Woolworths, took Auckland Council to court because and it challenged it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court ruled in favour of Auckland Council to have localised alcohol policies because they were trying to go, but the default, so the alcohol policy, this is an example of a corporate taking there, and this is alcohol, this is not resource consent planning, but it's the same principle. Is the fact that the default law gave 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. was the default, was national default limits. But it gave councils the ability to have localised plans that suited their communities better. Progressive took councils to court for not enforcing what was the maximum of what the law allowed. There were councils such as Hauraki where they actually had cases, they were put in applications for trade for sale of alcohol outside the hours of their operating of their business. So the business shut at 9 o'clock at night, but they wanted to be able to sell alcohol until 11 p.m. And it's not like they expressed interest on saying, we're looking at increasing our trading hours either. Like, there was no expression of that in that process of why they wanted to extend the application, but they wanted it because the maximum the law allowed was up until that time. And it just basically eroded what the local residents wanted, because the local alcohol plan was a 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. model, or something. It was something like that. Yeah, and it was and it was quite a generous limit they had. It wasn't like saying, you're only allowed to sell alcohol from 9:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Yeah, I mean, there's one bottle store in the country that actually literally had to shut for 2 hours between 2:30 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. because the kids walking home from school.
Yep.
I mean, this is going back. This is more than 10 years ago. There was a bottle store in Cannons Creek. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Rachel. The RMA is an absolute resource management. Any type of legislation around that is an absolute dog's breakfast to navigate through. It's really complicated, and we've got a real issue in New Zealand with duplication of laws.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. We definitely need. You need to have times where you need. Possibly that's where the Ministry of Regulation does come handy, is to catch up with these things such as duplication of laws.
Yeah.
And maybe that's something that might come positive out of David Seymour's Ministry of Regulations, considering I do believe it will probably be on the chopping block of the next government.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, Julie Ngenta, my local MP.
To acknowledge that our urban planning rules have been the source of many of the challenges that we face today. And I've spent the last 20 years trying to find opportunities to get better urban planning rules. While the RMA has been a bogeyman, I would say it wasn't necessarily the RMA that was the problem. It was the lack of national direction, which was always meant to be brought in under the RMA. And then it was the detail of the rules in many of the plans that caused many of the problems. For example, separating out land uses, requiring minimum parking requirements, a whole series of intersecting rules that stopped us from developing high quality density done well, as we did really up until the 1960s and 70s. So definitely changing our approach to urban planning is a huge opportunity to get more sustainable, affordable cities, which is what we need to respond to both climate change, but also have healthier, happier people, a more productive economy, lower transport costs right across the country. It's necessary but not sufficient to deliver these things. We also need changes in government investment in infrastructure and probably much more public house building as well, whether that's at a local government or central government level. It's a very interesting long bill, and I agree with the previous speaker, Rachel Brooking, that a lot of the good parts of this planning bill do retain some of the changes the previous government brought in that were repealed when this government came in, like the Spatial Planning Act, comes back in a form in this bill. And I do congratulate the minister on having a full select committee process. We're looking forward to that and to teasing out all of the detail, and for keeping us briefed to some extent on the progress on this new system. There's a lot to like in the new system, and I see a lot of potential to get better outcomes. Nonetheless, I think it is at this point difficult for us to support the bill, and it primarily comes down to some of the goals laid out in Clause 11, which I'm sure the minister will understand, and I completely understand why the coalition government has framed goals in this particular way, but I think it does miss the mark. A sub-goal to create well-functioning urban and rural areas, that sounds really good, but there's no definition of what that means, so a lot of that will come down to the specifics of, when we see the national direction laid out, then that will be something that maybe we can support. Probably our biggest hang-ups from the Greens, and no one will be surprised about this, has to do with 11.1b, 11.1d, and the lack of hierarchy in these. So, and also, as the previous speaker, my colleague Rachel Brooking pointed out, the much more restricted recognition of mana whenua and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which no doubt would be a condition from some of the coalition partners. So for the Greens, it's fundamental to our future as a country that we recognise Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the kaitiaki role of tangata whenua, and that's something that should be reflected in our approach to planning. Secondly, I think the goal of the planning bill has to be developing sustainable, healthy cities and towns. And that would be a much better goal, I think, than enabling competitive urban land markets. It is true that the way that we approach housing and land at the moment is a very commodified approach, but I think that's not how it has to be. And while we do want to enable more homes within existing urban areas, which will mean more affordable housing, more affordable transport, and will reduce costs for people in many, many ways across the, public health, air quality, climate change. There's so many win-wins of that approach. But describing it as competitive urban land markets, to me, is too narrow and doesn't, recognize that we're more than just an economy. Like, the point of the economy is to support humans to live good lives and in harmony with our natural environment, because we're actually part of it. We need nature to survive and thrive.
Member's time has expired.
Gee, she was quick to get in there. It's like, your time's expired. Get off.
Oh, I mean, the bell went off. Yeah, it's a shame first reading speeches are only 5 minutes, because Julian said like she actually had a speech that could probably go on quite, like a decent, fulfilling, worthwhile speech that could have gone on for 10 minutes. I couldn't say 20, but 10 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, if anyone knows about the damn RMA, it's her.
Yeah. She mentions a great point about car park availability. There are multiple council housing flats in Wellington, which do not comply with the one car park per dwelling rule because of when they were built.
Yep.
And they are an exact example of where it will be appropriate to get rid of that one car park per dwelling rule would be in places where they're like, you know, I'd say within 200 metres of a direct public transport link. That is a clear example of what is something that should be removed. I mean, you know, like Wellington, put it this way, I'm within 200 metres of the bus route. I've also got to admit the house that I live in was built probably before the one car park rule existed, because actually our property doesn't have any off-street parking.
Now, explain to me what this one car park rule is. This is very specific.
Okay, so in order to stop, so it was a place where, so it would mean that your dwelling, your property, you'll not be having an excessive amount of cars being stored on public infrastructure. It stated that all new builds had to have one car park per dwelling as part of the resource consent.
Okay.
You know, but I mean, the interesting part that came with it is sometimes that rule can also be a contradiction because, you can't have one car park on the street, but then to put in the driveway in, you would take away one car park from road so the car can park on private property. So it can jump in different areas, but effectively it meant that there had to be one car park per property. But I mean, you also get scenarios where that is in place in many buildings, but you have situations where landlords themselves aren't giving that car park to their tenants, or they are leasing it to other people outside the tenancy, which means you're still putting the problem onto the road.
Yeah, because sometimes it's just not practical. Like having driven around in Wellington, it's not practical to have a car park right next to your house. You have to have it on the road.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, when you take a car park from the road and you put it onto I do know there is one particular address in Wellington where it is not completed yet. It's still a while away, but the curbing has been put out ready, so when the owner puts car park on the property, the car park on the road disappears. But the reason why she hasn't completed it is because of the fact that it's taken a car park off the road. It's kind of that rock and a hard place situation of, like, you've got to have property off the dwelling, but you've got to do it. And like, we've got, like, outside my house, my next door neighbour, or might be two houses down, they have a car park on the property, but there's no way actually for them to access the road if there's a car blocking the road. Yeah. It is one of those, and I mean, you get some crafty solutions when it comes to housing, like in the previous place I lived at, with the one car park dwelling rule. It did lead to the fact that the car park was built into the housing structure. I mean, it was a little, like, if you lived in the bottom room, you had to walk through the garage to get into the place, the garage part where you keep the car, to get into the bedroom. It was the way, you know, there's many buildings that are designed because of that one car park per dwelling rule. But you get other areas where, there are some situations where it being there has actually caused more of a problem than what it solved.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's got to be something that's got to be tied to a situation like, I know the council housing in Daniel Street, there are something like 6 car parks, and there's, I think there's 6, so that's 12, plus 18 and plus, I think it's 6, and I think it could be either 12 or 18 at the back. So I think there are between 24 and 30 dwellings of one-bedroom flats on the property of council housing, and there are a total of 6 car parks on the property.
Did you have something to say, Biggie?
Someone wanted to sit there and tell the world they're here.
Anything to say? No thoughts, just car parks? Okay. Yep, I agree with him. I agree with Biggie.
Yeah. Let's get on to Simon Court with probably another decent speech.
Simon Court.
It's with great pleasure that I stand today to read the planning bill for the first time. This is a single, fit-for-purpose law, unapologetically focused on preparing and facilitating growth and development. I want to acknowledge my ministerial colleague, the Honourable Chris Bishop. We've worked together exceptionally well. It's been a pleasure, and New Zealand will look back on this time and say, wasn't that coalition government great? This bill champions that continued human development that has seen generation after generation growing up with greater opportunity than their parents, and it recognises that property rights must be the anchor for this. For decades, the RMA stood in the way of that progress. It's made it harder to build homes and even harder to deliver the infrastructure to make those homes livable. Roads, water supply, electricity, renewable energy, every major and minor project has faced uncertainty, unnecessary delay and eye-watering costs. The planning bill is an important step in ending that zero-sum RMA game that says you can have either development or the environment, but not both. A separate natural environment bill will complete the overhaul of the RMA's failed sustainable management approach, which mushed development and environment together for no discernible environmental outcomes. We are clear about what functions a planning bill must deliver, and with property rights as the starting point. Minister Bishop has articulated the goals, which begin with ensuring people are free to use their land, and on the basis that they don't impinge on that right of others to use their land. And the goals extend to critical functions like ensuring we have readily available land and infrastructure to enable cities and regions to grow. The limited scope of the goals is the entry to the funnel Minister Bishop spoke to, intentionally narrowing the scope of the planning system. This sets parameters for national policy direction, the national standards that will further define and streamline that direction, the fewer combined plans that will apply that direction in each region, and any limited residual function that consenting still plays in this much more enabling system. These core elements sit alongside a range of carefully designed provisions, which together recognise not just a need for a legislative overhaul, but a fundamental culture shift to restore Kiwis' property rights and the number 8 wire mentality we used to celebrate. We have raised the bar for what effects are considered material. We've reduced the ability for people to inject themselves into your business and to resist that outrageous government intrusion on private property rights that we've seen under the RMA. We've raised the bar for notification of consents as well and ensured only those in the relevant regional district can submit. This prevents any Tom, Dick and Harry from completely different regions weighing in on your application. Notification should be reserved for those only materially affected. We do recognise the important role of communities, including Māori, in shaping their spaces, but we've intentionally provided for more robust opportunities for engagement earlier in the system, including through the plan-making process. Culture change also requires ending the RMA's absurd bespoke planning processes and requiring consents for common activities we know how to do well. Instead, we will codify best practice and will trust builders, farmers and infrastructure operators to meet that standard, subject to compliance monitoring and enforcement. And culture change certainly means ending unjustified limits on the use of private property. Regulatory relief will mean that for some controls over private property, things like outstanding natural landscapes and significant historic heritage, councils will have to provide relief to affected property owners where those restrictions are significant. And if they can't justify the relief, they can't impose the controls. Because if the public good case is not strong enough to convince ratepayers it warrants relief, then it can hardly warrant the costs that the private property owner would be forced to bear. A new planning tribunal will drive further accountability and the culture shift by essentially putting a referee on the field for private property owners for the first time. Madam Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Well done.
Now, I can sit there and tell you, as a business owner who is also a renter, when I have gone looking for properties, can I park it on there? And the number of property management landlords want to interfere with the operations of my privately run business is abysmal.
Mm-hmm. I was going to bring up the...
So him saying about giving private properties, as a renter who owns a business who may need to have things like, I've looked at like trying to find places where I can store my coffee cart on property that I was renting. The number of people who want to be nosy parkers interferes. I mean, Simon Court, you haven't cut, now I'll be honest, I've not made you aware of this issue. You're not the ACT MP based in the Rongotai electorate, that's Nicole McKee. But, the amount of busybodies, landlords, who sit there and do it. Like my last place I was at, my landlord sat there and interfered with it. And one of the reasons why I left was apparently my business, I was breaching the lease agreement, which is a bit weird because the stock wasn't actually in there, of leaving stuff in there and had to sit there and remove it in there. Now, the fact is that this wasn't happening at all because the majority of it was stored in my coffee cart because, why would I store stuff in my lounge when I can store it in my business where it trades? But you get, talk about property rights. Like, I have never, as someone who's a renter, I have never felt that I've had the situation where I've been able to exercise my private property rights in the same way that you mentioned that we should be able to have. They seem to always get sidelined because they seem to be merely inconvenient by somebody who doesn't understand, doesn't want to listen, busybody landlord.
Well, because for starters, they know that renters are not going to vote for them. So they're appealing to landlords who are going to vote for them. So they're going to uphold their private property rights because there's a hierarchy of private property rights here. But yeah, it's a bit of an oxymoron. It's like when my freedom to use my land impedes on your freedom to use your private property. Does that account? How does that move over to things like noise pollution? Because I can bring up a really good example of this. I used to work on an organic farm, and they had chickens, right? They still have chickens, but anyway, so I'm talking in the past tense. Had chickens, right?
Yeah.
Next door to them, a gun club opened. And the gun club was causing so much noise that it actually directly impacted the business of the farmers.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. So in that situation, who would Simon Court back? Would he back the farmers who are trying to make a living, or would he back the gun club?
Production may have halved.
Yep. His production was significantly impacted.
Or the gun club that wasn't there first.
Yeah. So who has the freedom to do what in that situation? Does the farmers get to retain their freedom to have the chicken farm and to have their chickens and have them happy and running around, doing organic chicken things? Or is it the gun club who's like, my freedoms though, and my guns, and I want to shoot things, ping, ping, pow, pow? Who wins? Who wins in that situation? Is the person who's there first, or the person?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's actually a very good example of what happens when those boundaries cross.
What about lead pollution from leaving bullets all over the place? So some people don't clean up after themselves.
We actually had a stage where we used to have lead in our petrol, and we actually got rid of it because it actually caused problems with which ultimately lowered a few IQ points off people for it, that we actually got rid of lead out of the petrol. We also had cars that no longer require lead to actually be put in petrol as well. So I mean, that was a bit of a bonus, was the fact that our technology moved on, that we no longer needed to put lead in our petrols.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, there are still some cars out there that do require lead to be put in their petrol, but you can buy, you don't need to put lead in everything for the less than 1% classic cars that need it.
I think this is the key difference here between the right-wing libertarian and the left-wing libertarian like myself. We understand that our property is a part of a larger ecosystem. We don't live in a little bubble where everything is contained to our property. Yeah. Everything we do does have an impact. Like if I go and mow my lawn, I know that the neighbours is going to hear me. If I fire up my chainsaw at 10 p.m. in the evening, I know the neighbours are going to complain. They're not going to be a fan of that. And rightfully so. It's impacting their ability to sleep and go to work and make money for their family. So
and actually here's another one when it comes to a public one. This is when Wallace Street was to be closed for 6 months to re-put up pipes. There were people out there who go, no council, naughty Wellington City Council, you got this one wrong. You should do the work at night in a residential area.
Oh, fun.
And then people go, but it's a residential area. Well,
at night?
Yeah, you might get away with one night. You can't get away with it for 6 months on end.
No.
And there were 3 proposals put on the table. One was it was a 3-month closure and then 1 lane stop go sign. There was an option of a 6 months closure with a detour on Wright Street, and which was the shortest of the 3, or another one went on for nearly 12 months. And the residents said, we want the 6-month option.
Oh, here's
because it meant the work was not limited to a stop-go sign. And it basically, so we chose the 6-month option. And then people wanted to come out and take the council to the court and put injunctions in to stop the council from doing it, because their idea was, you should do it at night. Because they just saw, it's a main road thoroughfare being Wallace Street.
Well, speaking of nighttime, it makes me think of fireworks. New Zealand First is out here going, we should ban fireworks, and then you've got ACT going, private property rights though.
I should be allowed to set up my fireworks at the gun range next to the organic chicken farm.
Yeah.
We've found a very great ironic example there.
I don't know, that argument from the right-wing libertarians, or that point, it doesn't work because it implies that we all live in little bubbles, and we don't.
Yeah, exactly, which we don't. I mean, like, what's the next one is, like, why do I need to tell people where I'm going? I don't use my indicators, I just drive. I mean, cars honk me, horn at me, but they're wrong to honk me, horn at me, you know, just because I nearly crashed into them and I ignored the stop signs.
Once upon a time, the right-wing libertarians used to argue against seatbelts.
Oh, God, yes. Yeah, and probably also against drink driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to show this video at some point, but the libertarian debate about toasters from the Libertarian Party for America, I don't know if you've seen that. It's hilarious. You got all these libertarian candidates debating about, you know,
the brand of toaster to use.
Yeah, debating about driver's licenses, and one of the guys stood up and said, "What's next? Do I need a license to operate my toaster?"
Well, the driver's license just proves that you're competent, that you're medically fit to drive. You know, you don't want someone who's, blind driving a car. You don't want someone who's got epilepsy who could have a seizure at any time driving a car.
But as far as they're concerned, the car is your private property, and you're a taxpayer, and you pay for the public road. Therefore, you should just have the right to drive on the public road without having a license that proves that you can competently drive a car. Because if you can't competently drive a car, you can impact the freedoms of others by, I don't know, ruining their lives or killing them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why a lot of states in the United States actually have compulsory car insurance.
Yes.
For that reason. You know, because they don't have ACC.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get on to Jamie Arbuckle.
Jamie Arbuckle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to support the planning bill. This is a great day today as we put the new framework in for resource management in New Zealand. New Zealand First campaigned in the 2023 election on getting resource management a better system in place. We know that RMA for a number of years, actually, Madam Speaker, over decades now, has been broken. It has been plaguing New Zealand with bureaucratic complexity, excessive litigation, and has only hindered development. So today, putting this system, getting it underway, is changing the way resource management will be dealt with. What we do need, Madam Speaker, is through the Select Committee, as the Minister has described, a really good process for submissions. So really glad to hear that submission process will be longer, to hear the views, especially from councils and people that use the resource management system, to hear those views and to refine anything in this bill as we go forward. But Madam Speaker, the thing I want to really say is we do need an enduring system going forward. We can't be swapping and changing. We need to actually, in this House, is actually get behind this bill and actually go into the next election and give people in New Zealand certainty. We want to give certainty to our businesses and to our community so we can actually lift productivity in this country. What we have seen in this bill, Madam Speaker, is that there is no great surprises. We have signalled through the ministers that it was set around property rights. That has come through in the bill. And also that it's a top-down decision-making. It's about giving consistency. We do not want to see ad hoc plans across this country. We've had too much ad hoc planning where we want to have some consistency so we know if we go from one district to another that we've got consistency in the rules. We're also having the national instruments that will become a fundamental part of this bill. They will come in through 2020 into 2026, 27, and having national standards, again, across the country that won't matter if you're in the bottom of the south or the top of the north, that you'll know what those national standards are. They will not be different across the country. We'll have those standardised plans with standardised zones so we know what development will go where. And one thing that was a real bugbearer from my time of being a hearings commissioner was all the different activity classes there was, Madam Speaker. And we used to have a thing called a non-complying activity. And as a decision maker, you'd have to go through this gateway test, and all of a sudden something that was almost seen to be prohibited, you could go through a gateway test and then be able to actually try to find a way to get that consent through. Where this is streamlining the classes, making things either more permitted, or if they're going through a system, making them complying activities so you can actually get things through the system quicker. Also, another bugbearer for especially the New Zealand First Party, and if you look in the coastal area, has been around amenity and landscape when we're talking about things like aquaculture, where you've got in like the Marlborough Sounds, where we've got about 60% of the marine farms, and you get hung up on some batch owner in Christchurch saying, oh, it's the amenity of this, we can't put this marine farm in this bay, where the marine farmers and the community there, they want to see the farms develop, but because of this silly thing around amenity, what was always subjective. It was always subjective by some people that were well-paid landscape architects and that saying you could not do it. That's gone. So we're really pleased to see that this bill will enable economic growth and infrastructure development. But, Madam Speaker, what I'm proud of to stand in this House is this is about creating jobs, it's about creating investment, and it's about increasing productivity. I will commend this bill to the House. Thank you.
I don't know the specific case he's talking about with the aqua farms and the.
That does sound like you can get some person who goes, because I'm only there twice a year, I want to object to a salmon farm being built in the same corridor as somewhere else. And he is mentioning the fact of something that is to do with the Marlborough Sounds. There are people who, are part-time dwellers who would want to object to economic prosperity. Like, you could have a situation where you have 95% of the people are for a project, and you'll have some person from, say, as he described, from Christchurch, who's the batch owner, trying to stop it all.
Couldn't the inverse also be true? Like, you get a developer who hangs around a couple of times a year, who wants to build this massive infrastructure thing, and the community says, no, we don't want this, but it's just like, but the council's like, yep, we want to go ahead and do this, despite the
Yeah, it is a rock and a hard place. Like, because in order to object to something, like under the RMA, if effectively it's not going to cause harm, a council's hands are kind of tied to grant consent.
Yep.
Okay, and this was something that I looked at because this is something that was brought up as concern. I'm not as worried about it now as I was back in 2019, but it was with 5G cell phone towers.
Right, okay.
The cell phone tower, the way the signal has to travel is it's a lot more point to point. Now, at this point, there was a lot less information regarding 5G at the time. So when it came to, say, 5G towers, there was an assumption that the 5G towers themselves were the same size as a 4G tower.
Mm-hmm.
And what type of radiation would it be pumping out? And because there was no standard for it. Now, as time has gone on and as more information has come out, the sizes of these 5G towers actually were a lot smaller than the 4G tower. A 5G tower, it can be just slightly bigger than your home Wi-Fi router unit.
Right,
now,
okay.
The other very big concern that came out of there was the fact that in order to make 5G to work, you've got to have an unimpeded, unobstructed path. And what that could do is lead to a lot of things like trees being cut down so that you would have so the 5G tower was fully functionable.
Yep.
Whereas, and that's something I actually grossly object to, because it's like, well, why can't we just have 4G instead, which can radiate through trees? And that's something that has to really seriously be looked at, is that with the trying to have a 5G tower versus a 4G tower, what significant benefit are we getting versus the ups and downs? Because the thing is, many things can function on 4G perfectly fine. 5G is, yes, it's faster, but it's only faster for the devices that actually do it. Like this cell phone here, my cell phone, that ain't 5G capable. I've never bought one. I've decided to me, it's just a waste of money. Also, if you sit there and also take another look at it, when they were charging extra to have 5G services. So you had to pay an extra $10 a month to actually have 5G enabled. And I remember my former campaign male paid for that while she lived in a concrete building that struggled to get 4G signal. But yeah, it is it's like, so that was something I had concern about. And this is something Sarah Free brought up about the Resource Management Act, is the fact that unless there was something that would actually cause problems with it, you were pretty much forced, your hands were tied to grant the consent unless there was something that actually could stop that consent from being granted.
Right,
Like,
okay.
you know, like, you might be able to stop the consent from being granted if it was going to sit there and cut down the trees of the town belt. That could lead to a landslide. But you wouldn't be able to sit there and say, oh, I object to the tower because it's sitting on top of a traffic light pole on Adelaide Road. You know, that sort of thing there. You know, it was definitely, you know, so at which point do you draw a line? Now, I'm not sure if people know this, but a lot of 4G towers actually have 5G technology on them now, depending where they are. So that is something that actually has happened because you don't actually need to change the resource consent between a 4 and 5G signal coverage on the same cell phone tower. But to build a new cell phone tower, you need new resource consent. And cell phone towers require resource consent. They cannot get building permits because they produce hazardous effects such as radiation.
Yeah. I mean, talking about Jamie Arbuckle's example, right? If you've got the community there that really wants the aqua farm and it's going to have no drastically negative impacts, because everything has an impact on the environment. It just depends on the risks and benefits. But if it has more benefits than risks to the environment, then I got no problem with something like that going ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, why should the guy who only turns up twice a year on a fancy yacht have the final say?
Yeah, exactly, yes. Bang smack on there, yeah. Okay, shall we listen to Debbie Naruapaka? I know we're over time. Let's see what Debbie
we'll do one more. Do one more.
Yeah.
Debbie Naruapaka. Te Pāti Māori is not opposed to development. In fact, it's really important. A lot of our communities need warm homes, they need safe roads, and they need resilient infrastructure. The problem that we are having with this is why development consistently comes from this government at the cost of te tiriti, mana whenua, community voices, and environmental integrity. And I think that's some of the questions that we pose at this stage of the bill. And again, we cannot understand why it is that those who are building houses and in fact really committed to the economic development of Aotearoa, i.e. iwi, hapu, and mana whenua, are constantly relegated or sidelined in the government's thinking when it comes to the bills and the amendments and the way that they see things going forward. So it's not so much about what will be built, it comes down to who will decide. And it does seem, again, consistently that this government doesn't see a role for iwi or hapu or mana whenua when we can look at what it is that they've proposed in Section 11 and where they see the participation of iwi. And the vagueness, we talk about giving certainty through legislation, but actually this gives uncertainty to not only the way that te tiriti is seen, but the way that iwi are seen by this government in any role of development. And we take exception with that. The fact that we've got I think Section 9 is saying that, look, there's going to be a 2-year appeal, which creates uncertainty for iwi and hapu, the exclusion of statutory acknowledgement, the way that it provides uncertainty to existing settlements, which have taken generations to confirm and to be able to enact. And there's actually some really great partnerships that are going out in local sense. So the sell of, or the marketing of this bill being able to reset and make life easier for everyday New Zealanders seems to exclude Māori. There are concerns with the centralisation of power. That's not been something that's worked for a lot of our local communities very well at all. In fact, it gives out quite broad ministerial powers to set the national instruments, to override councils, to appoint members to spatial plan committees and intervene directly in plan making. We cannot see how that heightens the relationships for our local and regional decision makers and certainly the communities. These, in fact, reduce public participation and get the whole concept of providing jobs and development for us as a nation. But again, that shouldn't be at the cost of those who are materially affected. There seems to be a watering down of not only the treaty, but where this government sees communities, particularly those who are going to be adversely affected. One of the things that we've been really concerned about is this development versus protection. And it says that the bill will balance housing, infrastructure, the environment and Māori interests, but there's actually no clear rule of hierarchy of where te tiriti sits in this. From certainly the iwi's perspective, te tiriti comes first, and that's in fact what the governments have agreed to in the settlements and the relationships that they have with them. So again, this vagueness of why Māori rights are being watered down is concerning, that the government's continued this theme with a lot of the way that it sees that these amendments or the way that this bill is going to work is going to be able to work better. And it just really means that there'll be more time spent in courts and spent doing things that are counterproductive to developing the economy of Aotearoa. Environmental and heritage protections, we've seen some of that effect management really narrowed, concerningly narrowed down. And this whole treaty transition, where we see treaty settlements are going to be negotiated or rearranged within a 2-year period, what happens if that doesn't land the way that the iwi who have settled expected it to? What is the government providing for certainty? Are they going to be opening up so much more for the complex settlements? And what what they're risking to everyone in New Zealand when we have to see some of those opened up. So not pleased with some of the changes, have been pleased with the fact that the Minister did engage with us and has actually agreed to extend this and make sure that the public have a really good say about this bill, but certainly at this stage we don't support the first reading. Thank you.
Madam
A very well concise speech, Debbie. Straight to the point, no riffraff, no tangents.
Yep, pretty good little summary there, actually. The biggest concern I have with this legislation is the centralisation of power, and and removing the ability for people to object. Especially if a big corporation comes in with a big plan,
and all the money for the lawyers.
Yeah, and all the money for the lawyers to pretty much override what the local community needs and wants. That will always be a concern to me. I've always been a small local government person myself. So yeah, it does concern me, especially when you take into conjunction things like the Public Works Amendment Bill. You take into effect the Wildlife Amendment Act. I'm trying to remember these off the top of my head. The Fast Tracks Bill. There's just a lot of stuff that's just been, when you lump them together, you go, oh shit. But here's the thing, and this is why bills like this are kind of hard to write submissions for, because there are good things in here, but there are also, if you have to really pick to find the nastier stuff.
Exactly.
Like, not everything in these bills are bad, but the things that have been identified as bad could be quite detrimental for local communities.
Yeah, exactly. Now, just while you mentioned the word Public Works Bill.
Yeah.
You inspired this command into ChatGPT.
Yeah, there you go. I'm okay with this. I mean, not my stance. Anyone that knows me, I'm not a big fan of generative AI, but when it comes to little small channels like this, I don't have a problem with using generative AI once in a blue moon to make a funny thumbnail. I think it's fine.
Yeah, and that literally holds it up quite well. And the image there of Irene Kuipera is her by-election picture. Because I know when I sent it to Kiwi Skirt, I said, what do you think? It's like, oh, good, do you have permission from that person? I go, no, but it is Irene Kuipera. And I was like, oh, yes, I should have recognised the person from that, yes.
Yeah, I think it will be okay. Like you're not doing a Hobson's pledge out here, grabbing some.
No. And actually, I think if Irene actually looked at the context of what it was, and like the whole thing behind it, she will actually go, hell yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah, we should do that more often with just have like a person with a trash can just dumping all the bills into Mount Doom,
Just to let you know, Kiwi Skirt, those shorts are all done by AI through Opus Clips. So we actually do a fair. There's a lot more that gets done on AI.
But here's the thing. I can assure you that me and Sam are both real, right? We're not AI generated. We're not like putting ourselves into Sora or anything weird like that. It was like create. No. No. Like,
no, we don't have the money to do that.
Yeah, but even if we did, I wouldn't. I'd be like, bro, don't use my face like that, man.
Yeah, exactly. No, it is a tool to sit there and do that. As I say, I use it for tools for certain things, such as like ChatGPT. That is a brilliant tool to get titles for our YouTube videos based on the Hansards, and it also is useful for getting hashtags.
Yep.
And, it is a useful tool. Would I sit there and ask legal advice from ChatGPT? No, because it will give you the answer you want to hear, not necessarily the answer you should be hearing.
Yes, and that's the important caveat when you're using AI programs. Like, look, I use DeepSeek. I'm not going to lie. I use it to help me summarize big documents because I take a lot of notes and then I put all the notes into DeepSeek and I go, please help me tidy up these notes so they're more easier for me to read and to riff off, And I usually get to do it in bullet points, so I still have to think when I talk. But the bullet points are there, going, please remember this point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, for those who are wanting to know what submissions that are available for there, now I've just got to start looking down there because I actually haven't uploaded anything more from it since we last did the shows. I forgot to actually do that. Okay, so the International Treaty, International Treaty Examination of Agreement to Establish the Pacific Reliance Facility. That's the name of it. Closes this Wednesday, the 21st. The Public Works Amendment Bill closes on Tuesday, the 27th of January, the day that the MPs get back to Parliament. The Emergency Management Bill closes on Tuesday, the 3rd of February. The Budget Policy Statement closes on Wednesday, the 4th of February. The Commerce Promoting Competition and Other Matters Amendment Bill closes on Wednesday, the 4th of February. The Planning Bill and Natural Environment Bill, the one we've just covered on our show today, closes Friday, the 13th of February, the day before, was it Valentine's Day? So make sure you get that submission in before you go out on Valentine's Day for the dates. And you've got the Arms Bill, which closes on Friday, the 16th of February. And we've also got the Crime Amendment Bill, where Sonny from can arrest people at Derry when he feels pleased. Bill. This is the one where you sit down and you put a submission, say people should actually have to be qualified to do a citizen's arrest and be trained.
Yep.
So you don't end up having people, being spear tackled because, I didn't realise you paid for the chocolate bar. Yeah, it's like imagine spear tackling a 10-year-old and then doing a ground and pound on them. It's just, it's like, come on, man. That's just assault at that point. It's not even self-defense. Simon has asked, I'm curious if the 4-year referendum bill is still doing submissions. No, it's long past that point. I don't think it's proceeded to second reading yet, but it's definitely long after submissions because I did put a submission on it. So I do remember putting, not sure if that was the one, because there was a few bills all tied around the same point that had submissions on it. But I mean, I think those submissions were before local body elections. Yeah.
Well, was it? Yeah, it might have been actually, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember doing that before local body elections.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was when I was doing submissions in person. Yeah, because the last 2 submissions I've done to the Justice Committee I did online because of the way things are. Yeah. Okay, we'll be back next week. Now, what are we covering next week? Because we can tell you that at the moment. Yeah. However, don't get used to this. This will be the last time we'll be able to sit there and do it. The Buildings Earthquake-Prone Building Amendment Bill and Infrastructure Funding and Financing Amendment Bill, both first readings, will be read here next Sunday. We do have our poll with our lovely results, and we're going to end the poll now. Thank you for that. Should we look at doing repeats for our shows? 62% says we should repeat the show sometime during the week, and 38% say no. So I think that's something we might need to consider about whether we run a repeat during the week to bring up the watch hours.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an option, but it could clash with Kiwi Pulse. It just depends.
Oh, exactly. We've got to sit down there and look at like when we're going to do it.
Yeah. Like, I think, like, on a Saturday, you could do a rerun or,
Oh, yeah. No, part of me was thinking, like, a pre-warm-up to BHN.
Who would that clip potentially clash with?
Monday and Tuesday clashes. Wednesday doesn't. Thursday does.
Oh, okay. Just do it on Wednesday.
Yeah. No, I've gone for a week because you've got Aotearoa tonight on Monday. You've got the Bradbury Group on Tuesday, and you've got Andrew Kai on Thursday.
Yeah, no, Wednesday's good. That's a really good slot.
Yeah, that's been a date that it's been a potential for content could go into or could not, but it could be a trial run. It's to see if different people watch the repeat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll see you guys all next Sunday for our Auckland anniversary weekend special celebrated by 2 Wellingtonians.
Okay.
Yeah. Sweet. Okay, bye.
Thank you for watching the Order Paper, your express ticket to the New Zealand House of Representatives. Every episode, we unravel the complex world of legislation, debate, and democracy. From bills to select committees, we've got it all covered. From our team of political commentators who will dissect and explain what's happened so you can remain up to date on what's happened in the Aotearoa, New Zealand Parliament. To support our channel, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/it'sintheballot. The Order Paper podcast is brought to you by It's in the Ballot Productions, live at 8 p.m. New Zealand